Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Krishna Balaram, Jaya Vrindavan, Krishna Balaram, Jaya Vrindavan. Jaya Radha Shama Sundar, Radha Shama Sundar, Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Radhe. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Nitai Gaura Sitnath Premanande. Jai Vishnupad Paramans Parivrajikacharya Shuttara Tara Shishmai Divine Grace Sesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai 5th Canto Understanding Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol. So now that we've sang together, we're more familiar. Could we next move close, because it's pretty hard to look at these. Could you move towards the center and closer? Because there's no need for us to be so distant from each other. Once we're familiar that we've sang together, then we can be closer. It's a little easier for me too if there are people in the middle, or else I'll have to keep turning, you know. So we've come here today to discuss the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the structure of the universe. How does time fit in with the universe? How does time appear on our earth? And how does it appear on every other island on the earth called Bhumandala? So it's an interesting topic. And not so many people are interested in it, even though it's very interesting. However, Srila Prabhupada wanted a huge monument building to show the Vedic understanding of the universe. So therefore, many devotees have been researching the topic in depth in order to make it easier for other devotees to understand it. And then twofold things will happen after that. Once you comprehend something, you can then be moved by that thing that you've comprehended. It can act on your body. You know the sloka, Nasta Pravesya Bhadrasya Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki. So the idea is that by regular attendance in the Bhagavatam class, or by studying Bhagavatam, or by hearing about Bhagavatam from people who have done the research, etc., then you can have the Lord established in your heart and as an irrevocable fact. But that will then cause a revolution in your consciousness. So the idea is, of that sloka, that there has to be some change in the hearer. The hearer not just meaning when you're listening and someone's speaking, also when you're reading. When you read Srimad Bhagavatam, you're reading to yourself, so you're listening. And it's very important to understand what is the message going on in the Bhagavatam. And I've put a third heading on this seminar, which will be how to study Srimad Bhagavatam according to Shabda Brahman. So what is this Shabda Brahman? It has 4 forms to it. It's written in the 11th canto that Shabda, this pure sound vibration, it comes in the ears from a speaker. This is called Vaikarika, external. So someone may speak some knowledge, what they've gleaned from Shastra, that will go in your ear, and if it doesn't act to make a change, it'll go straight out the other ear. So the idea of this sloka that Narad Muni speaks is that there is a change in your heart. And that's the whole point when you're studying Bhagavatam. So I'll speak more in depth about that topic a little later. First I'll just introduce the universe. And then of course, by that hearing process, using Shabda, the pure sound vibration, and using the internal aspects of your body, then you perform devotional to the Lord from the platform of Brahman, so to speak. Yeah? So you can do that simply by hearing Bhagavatam correctly via these 4 forms of Shabda Brahman. And then as you're doing that, you're performing seva, worship of the Lord, in your mind, in your mental body. And in the spiritual form, that's another step. So that involves different processes of samadhi. You have to be immersed in that realm. But first you can perform some manasi seva simply by giving oral reception to the Bhagavatam and by using the 4 forms of Shabda Brahman. So 3 of them are internal. 1 of them is external, the Vaikarika. So that Vaikarika has to have an effect on your heart. It's very important I'll just pause there and you understand what the Bhagavatam has got to do to turn you from a materialistic person into a spiritual person. It has to have an effect on your heart so that when you're hearing, you hear from the heart. And you're performing some kind of connection with the Lord, with your internal bodies. So you have to spiritualize your mental body, your subtle body. The physical body you have to perform, it's called the sadhaka rupena. You have to perform service to your spiritual master externally. But internally, you have a mental form, and that has to become spiritualized. And if it's not, then your study of Bhagavatam is incomplete. So we're going to discuss how to do that as you hear Bhagavatam and study Bhagavatam. So it's an important part of understanding Bhagavatam, and the Vedic universe can help you to understand that. The fifth canto holds a lot of clues for devotees that are not advancing. I asked the question to myself, when one is studying scripture, one has to ask questions all the time to oneself. You have to be your own guru at one point. You have to start meditating and thinking. This is the whole point of Shabda Brahman. Excuse me. So I asked the question to myself, what is Vyasadev's intentions of putting a seemingly materialistic topic in the middle of Srimad Bhagavatam? Srimad Bhagavatam basically, it has the 10 cantos and the 5th is right in the middle, so you've got the 11th and 12th as supplementary. But you could also say the first is questions of the sages. So Bhagavatam really starts from the 2nd canto when Sukadev walks in and he starts telling about what are the first steps in God realization. So prior to that, we're having some questions from the sages. But I asked, why are you you address Vyasadev, because you've got to enter into a person's mind or a person's heart in order to understand what are their intentions. And so I realized that by understanding this canto, this small section of the Bhagavatam, you can go over the entire universe. The entire universe. I don't just mean, you've got a few little births here and there, you go through different species, you become a human being. Maybe you're promoted, maybe you get a better job or a king or this or that. But that's nothing compared with going to the next place and the next place and the next place and the next place, because each of those you increase in potency, you increase in power, till one day you become a divine being that has the power to be able to just create at will. And that's a lot of power, to just be able to do what you want as soon as you think it. So those places, you can go to those places simply by studying Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions that one who studies this sacred conversation of ours worships me by his intelligence. So this is what we're doing when we're studying Bhagavatam. And by studying the 5th canto, you can go over all the islands. You can also go to the sun planet. You can also go to the moon planet. Then you can go to Mahajana, Tapa, and Satyaloka, and you can even go to Brahmaloka just by studying Srimad Bhagavatam. But that's not the end of it. So what you're doing what Vyasadev's doing, shall we say, he's allowing his students, his disciples, to cross the whole universe. Once you know everything about the universe, you then want to know what is the intention behind putting the structure of the universe inside the Bhagavatam in the first place. Is it just to say there's some balls floating around in space, and if you get a rocket and you go so many hundreds, thousands of miles, you can go to the next planet? And you find that this definitely won't be the right answer. And when you study the 5th canto, you'll find there's a huge section of it based on the characteristics of the individuals within that universe. So the actual structure of the planets, how everything's situated, that's only in one chapter, in chapter 20. It's not a very important part in Vyasadev's teachings. But prior to that, you have, shall we say, 15 chapters of glorification, and via the glorification and teachings that go on, you find what are the characteristics of the inhabitants in the universe. So Vyasadeva isn't saying the universe is just something that's out there like our scientists say. Moreover, he says It's something that the people make, that the characteristics of the people, they make the universe. There are segregations in the universe for one reason, so that people of different characteristics can have different experiences. And by studying fifth canto, you can have a choice of if you want to go to some of these other areas. However, Vyasadeva has written it in such a way that he doesn't direct our attention to these places. So all the students, like the students of Prabhupada, who teaches, shall we say, pure bhakti, this kind of concept, also Narad Muni, etc., when you hear him pop in the Bhagavatam, he doesn't say to the people who he instructs, he doesn't say to them, go back to college and get a job and look after your family and this and that. He normally says, renounce the material nature and be a surrendered, pure devotee, so to speak. So those who spread pure bhakti, also in the teachings of Bharat Maharaj to King Rahugana, he says that talks of the material body and material interactions are nothing to do with the spirit soul. So his teachings, they cut through King Rahugana's, how would we say, anartas, his misunderstandings, that's a better word, his misunderstandings about nature. And Bharat Maharaj went straight to the point that the whole material universe is worthless, and you should go direct to the spiritual world. So Srimad Bhagavatam 5th Canto, it allows you to do just that. It allows you to pass over the entire material universe and be situated at the Lord's lotus feet. So if you go directly to the 10th canto, which, as we all know, Prabhupada warns against, and we think, well, we're devotees, that doesn't mean us, but it's not true. So there are, of course, many cantos before that, and every one of those is supposed to allow you to develop respect for Vishnu or Narayan. Because before you get to the pastimes of Krishna in Vraj, because they begin with Putana's pastimes in Vraj, or you have to have utmost respect for the Lord. So if you don't have this utmost respect, you'll misunderstand everything to do with Krishna. So therefore, all the cantos before the 10th canto, including the 5th, which is super important, have to be studied. Not just, shall we say, a little bit of reading here and there. The idea of being a devotee is that you've said goodbye to material nature. You're earning enough livelihood to look after yourself, but really your intention is to understand God through the literatures and through the service to the spiritual master. So these are some of the things I realized by looking at Vyasadeva's teachings with a view to try and find out what's in his mind. So the mind is actually inside the heart. So when you know someone's mind, you actually know their heart. So if you know their heart and you're looking for their intentions, then you find out what type of person they are. So when we're speaking about Vyasadeva, then we know he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His heart's completely pure, and he only wants to direct his students to the Supreme Lord. So there's not much mention about the other parts of the universe in comparison with what there is on Bharatvarsha, this earth. So for an example, Sukadeva will spend 16, 17, 18, and 19, so 4 cantos were spent just on the characteristics of the inhabitants of Bharatvarsha. So the first 3 of those dealt with what's called the island of Jambudweep, wherein there are manifested 11 deities of the Lord, and there are different pure devotees like Prahlad Maharaj and Mother Earth and Lord Ram, etc. And they're all giving their prayers. They're all giving their prayers to the deities that are situated in different varshas on Jambudweep. There are 9 deities, not 11. So then there are 7 of them in these early cantos, and then 2 of them are separate from there. And that's chapter 19, and it's very special because the title of chapter 19 is The Island of Jambudweep. So we spend 3 cantos hearing about Jambudweep, and then all of a sudden we go to the island of Jambudweep. But Jambudweep is an island. So we've got an island within an island. And that island he's speaking about in chapter 19 is Earth. It's our Earth. So in that particular chapter, there are 2 prayers given, one from Narad Muni. And Narad Muni, by the way, he's in charge of our Earth. He's in charge of the Bhakti on our Earth. Therefore, he gives the prayers to Naranarayan in Bhadrika Ashram. And then after that, it's Hanuman. Hanuman gives prayers to Ramchandra. Oh, he gives it first, and then Narad second. So they're very specific and they're very special. And it really behooves us to go in depth about these teachings and find out what is he trying to tell us by separating the different prayers and by putting them in there in the beginning. So I've got to confess that I've never spoke for, 20 years or something to an audience. And I've never, I didn't plan everything here for use. I just one day went in front of the Lord the other day and I said, maybe I should try and give the devotees something, what's in my heart. So then we arranged this for today, that was yesterday. And so if I'm going in different directions, please forgive me. There's nothing planned. There's no PowerPoint presentation. I've wrote 2 books to explain the whole structure of the universe, which will help the TOVP do their work. And in those books, there are a lot of mathematic calculations, so we won't be able to do those. But and also, you'll have to try and imagine the images I'm going to put into your mind as I'm speaking, because there's no blackboard. I asked if there was a blackboard I could draw on, but there's nothing. But anyway, it's okay, we'll speak. But really, what you need to take away from this is just the essence of what is inside the 5th canto, and what can it do for you as a person, and how can it change you to be more spiritual. We had a very nice class today by Satchidananda Swami, and Satchidananda Swami's class was using the technique of this 4 forms of Shabda Brahman. And I can see that Maharaj studies Bhagavatam in a certain way. There's a saying in England that says, it takes one to know one. So to see how someone's acting, you have to be doing that thing, and then you can see it in another person. You can see, they're doing this, they're doing that, you know. I spent many years learning how to write books, and in that experience, shall we say, then you learn how to compose things in certain structure. And then you learn how others have done it. So maybe you watch a movie and you know what's coming, or you know why they're doing that, and why they're doing that, and why they're doing that. So if you were to go in depth in Bhagavatam and the 5th canto, etc., then you would also learn what is in Vyasadev's heart, what is in Sukadev's heart, what are their intentions in different things. And you'll also be able to pick out, this is something that's quite nice when you see it, where is the difference between Vyasadeva speaking and someone else, Sukadev or the kings, or in the Bhagavatam you can't tell where Vyasadeva is speaking, but he speaks a lot. He gives a lot of teachings in there, supplementary teachings. And you can't know that if you don't go in depth. You think it's Sukadev who's speaking, or some king, or Brahma, or someone else, and it's not. So you have to search for these things, and that's when you're searching for Lord Krishna with your intellect. It's called Madhyama stage of using Shabda Brahman. Yeah. And if you don't do it, you don't enter inside. And if you don't enter inside, where are you? You're on the outside. And if you're on the outside, you've got the material nature to deal with. Then you've got the whole universe to go over. So, and you may say, well, we've got the Mahamantra. And that's correct, we've got the Mahamantra. And that's a part, everything is a part of the spiritual process. And you can't not go inside if you want to get to the spiritual world. You won't find the spiritual world outside unless you want to become a Brahmavadi. Then you can go with Lord Brahma when he closes the universe at the end of the Brahma's Mahakalpa. Then at the end of his life, you can go back with him, but you'll come back again. That's not a permanent position. So in order for you to go back to the actual spiritual world, you have to go inside the heart, and you have to go in through the different internal nadis. We have the external nadis called the veins and arteries of the body, and then we have the internal rivers that we have to go through, and we go through them with the mind, Shushumna Nadi, Indra Nadi, India. So you have to find how to go through them, and Bhagavatam is the way, just by focusing in the correct way on Bhagavatam's teachings. So where shall we begin with the fifth canto? Fifth canto or third canto? To understand the fifth canto, you also have to understand other cantos. So let's read something from the third canto. Chapter 11 discusses time in the universe. So let's see if we can have a look at something that's said by Maitreya. So in text 14, I'm just picking any text here, but in text 14, there's mention of, there are 5 different names for the orbits of the sun, moon, stars, luminaries in the firmament. They each have their own samvatsara. You know those, they're samvatsara, parivatsara, idavatsara, and vatsara. So those are the different circles. Prabhupada mentions there a year, each one's a year, but it's not a year, it's 360 degrees. So he's correct in the way that it's a circle, but each circle is a different period of time. So anyway, what's happening in this section of the Bhagavatam is Vidura wants to inquire about time. So Maitreya mentions that in the beginning of his statement, he mentions what time is. He makes a definition of what time is. So time is the Lord's instrument for acting in the material world. So when the Lord wants to act, he acts within the confines of time, and then everything unfolds in a linear fashion. So Maitreya begins by mentioning what are the first 2 combinations of atoms. He mentions that the atom is the underlying principle of the universe and can't be divided. So scientists think they're splitting the atom, and they think they can make matter from light, etc. But in essence, they're not splitting the atom, they're splitting the illusion of an atom within the atom. So there is an illusion within illusion within illusion. Everything is fractals in relation to the Lord. Whether it expands internally or externally, you can have the same thing going in. And so if the scientists want to imagine that they're splitting an atom, they'll just find another reality in there. So they'll have to go within that reality in order to make sense of it. So right now they can't make sense of it because their machines can't go fast enough because they're splitting light itself, or they're splitting space itself. So the device to do this is not a material device, it's the mind. If you want to split the atom and you want to go inside the atom, then you'll get a corresponding mystic city for that. Lord Krishna discusses that in Canto 11, round about chapter 17, and he discusses about the 8 primary forms of mystic opulences you can get from entering into the atomic particles of nature. Anyway, external time is measured from the atom up over. So then the first 2 atoms discussed by Maitreya Rishi form what's called a double atom. So you have 1 and 1 is 2, so he calls it a double atom. And then he mentions that 3 groups of double atoms combine to make what's called a hex atom. So if you look, you'll see a hexagon with 6 sides, so then you'll have a certain shape. So that hex atom, when you have many of them placed together, side by side, they make what's called the 2-dimensional space-time continuum. So they make a net or a web, so to speak. And when those are placed in 3 dimension, you make a cube. And then people live inside the cube of space. They live within these constructs of time. So time then will expand in different ways, and then Maitreya will explain about when it gets to the higher forms and it becomes seconds, moments, and then seconds and minutes, and then the muhurtas and the different yamas, the different periods of the day, etc. And then he'll go on to explain about the lifespan of humans, and then he'll, let's see if we can find that one. It's a very important part. I don't know where he's mentioned it. Anyway, after he talks about the life duration of humans, Vidura wants to know a little more. He wants to know what is the... No, he doesn't just stop at humans, sorry. He then mentions the demigods. So 1 day on the planet of the demigods equals 1 year on the human earthly planets. So these planets, the word planet indicates a place where people live. So you do know there is this huge discussion, is the earth flat, is the earth round? These globes are called planets and they float in the sky, therefore earth must be a planet and it must float in the sky, and Prabhupada wrote planets, and so it does. But basically Bhagavatam uses the term planets to discuss a place where people live. A plane that is inhabited, by people. So the day of the demigods, in comparison with the day of humans, that's a very important point that is completely misunderstood at the moment. And I apologize for saying this to anyone. We all love Prabhupada, but and Prabhupada's a complete pure devotee, we all know, and he's the emblem for all of us. But in relation to some things in Bhagavatam, they're slightly, they need a little tweaking, some parts. So Prabhupada mentions in one sloka that the demigod's day is 360 years here on earth. And he's mentioning about, let's have a look at, I think it's here. So Maitreya said, Vidura, the 4 millenniums called Satra, Dwapara, and Kali, the aggregate number of all these combined is equal to 12,000 years of the demigods. In that purport, Prabhupada said, the years of the demigods are equal to 360 years of humankind, as will be clarified in the subsequent verses. So in the next verse is a split up. It says Satya is 4,800 years of the demigods. Treta is 3,600 years. Dwapara is 2,400 and Kali is 1,200 years of the demigods. So then Prabhupada says, as aforementioned, 1 year of demigods is 360 years of the humans. So then he calculates 4,800 times by 360 is 1,728,000 years, which is Satya Yuga. So here there is some slight misunderstanding, and please don't ever think there's anything wrong with Prabhupada. He's perfect, and that's all there is to it. But the point is that if the demigod year was 360 of our years on earth, then after they live for 100 years, they'd live for 36,000 years. However, we in Satya Yuga live for 100,000 years. So how can we say we humans live for longer than demigods, when demigods live for the same expansive time of Manu, which, as Prabhupada writes, 306,720,000 years. So Prabhupada writes that. He writes that the demigods are born with Manu, and they leave the planet with Manu, they leave the Brahmanda with Manu. So we can't therefore accept that the demigods live for 36,000 years. It wouldn't make any sense. So there are some things like that I've been working on for many, many years, and come to an understanding. And what Prabhupada's doing here, he's multiplying 4,800 by 360, and he's getting the correct answer. So then he's assuming that that means 360 years. However, it means 360 degrees. So it's a circle. So 4,800 times by 360 degrees, one circle, and then you have the right length of time, which is 1,728,000 years for Satya Yuga. So he's got the right answer, but it's just something small within there. So anyway, I won't go further with that. I was going to explain why, but I'll go on to another part. Let's continue with what's been said with Vidura, because he asks, now I've understood the lifespan, I've understood time, how it works, how it's combining together to make a day. Sorry, I apologize. And then he's understood what is the lifespan of the humans and the demigods. Now therein, he hasn't just understood the lifespan of us, because we're not the only people in the universe. There are many humans in the universe. Many, 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 many. So many islands with humans on them. So Vidura is saying, I've now understood the lifespan of all the humans in the universe and of the demigods. Because in the past, knowledge wasn't hidden. Knowledge was very simple. Now knowledge is hidden from people. And somewhere back in the 16th century, some person called Nicholas Copernicus, this scientist who then propounded the globe model, allowed the Srimad Bhagavatam puts it like this in the 10th canto, a chapter called Descriptions of Autumn. In Kali Yuga, the atheistic theories will allow the honest teachings of the Vedas to be shadowed, to be hidden, to be covered over. So the atheistic doctrines, the atheistic agendas, and the atheistic presentations to humanity hide the truth, and that is quite acceptable in Kali Yuga. It's okay, that's what happens in Kali Yuga, you know. But Prabhupada wanted the TOVP to reveal these things and to show how these things the scientists say are not exactly how they say them. there is some small twists in there. So there are many humans. It's not like we're one globe floating in the universe with no other people anywhere, and the nearest planet is some Venus, maybe some trillions of light years away. Bhagavatam doesn't say any of this, so why should we believe it, you know? Prabhu, you have a question? Okay. Anyway, if anybody does have a question, just put your hand up. If I see you, I'll try and get through. Yeah. Not that I'm encouraging you, because then I'll go off track. But if you do have something you want clarifying, then just mention. I'm just talking off the top of my head. Last night my wife said, shouldn't you be studying this in order to present? I said, well, then if there's something in your heart, if it's there, and you live that life, there should be no problem with telling people how wonderful Lord Krishna is and explaining Krishna's glories in one way or another. But if I do go a little around the point, just pull me back and say you didn't explain this or you didn't explain that. So then we've now got to the point where Vidura, not you guys, but Vidura has understood the time frame of all humans on all what we call planets, but they're actually islands in the universe. So those islands are called Jambudweep, Plakshadweep, Shaumali-dweep, Kushadweep, Kranchadweep, Shakadweep. So those are the islands where the humans live. And those islands are special because they have one samvatsara of the sun will make 360 days, one year. And then he has explained the lifespan of the demigods and pittas from Pitriloka. So you may think Pitriloka is in hell down the bottom, but here in the Bhagavatam, in this section, it's explained that it's in Pushkaradweep. So I can explain that later, how that dichotomy is. So anyway, the situation on Pushkaradweep is different in that one samvatsara of the sun makes 24 hours. So Prabhupada explains that because of Bhagavatam, of course, Bhagavatam says it, one day on the demigod's planet equals 1 year on the human planet. But that's not our Earth. If it was, then time would be very strange, because 1 day there would be 1 year here. Actually, 1 day there is 100,000 years here. So when the sun rises and sets in Pushkaradweep, first it goes over the demigod's abode for 12 hours, and then it goes south and goes over the Pitrilokas for another 12 hours, and in that time 100,000 years passes on Earth. So Vidura understood this concept also. And in another island called Shakadweep, 1 year passes. So therefore you have the year on the demigod's island equals 1 year on Earth, because it's the year of Shakadweep, that Earth. It's still the same Earth, it's all Bhumandala, there's no difference. But there are different islands, and the sun is creating time on every island. So then he asks, I now wish to understand the life duration of those who live for longer than a kalpa, longer than the day of Brahma, or live within the day of Brahma. So the demigods don't, because the demigods, there are 14 sets of manus and demigods in every day of Brahma. And the demigods live for around about 71 years. After 71 years of their own lifespans up, then they die, and the universe is destroyed. Within that final year, they go into meditation, leave their body, and that will make 72 years in total. But then everything's destroyed in the Kalpa of Brahma, and it starts again. However, on Mahaloka, So that's the next planet up from our universe. It's not this earthly realm of Bhumandala anymore. Vidura's understood the whole of Bhumandala's time period. Now he wants to know what is the lifespan of those residents who live longer than a kalpa. And Maitreya mentions that in Mahaloka, beings live for 400 billion, 300 million years. So the lifespan of our universe is 4 billion, 320 million years. That's one day of Brahma. Everything in the Bhagavatam is made, all the different lifespans is made from a combination of two numbers, and possibly you can say three. And it's the male and female always. It's the interaction of Shiva and Shakti, which is the same as the first two atoms combining, which is Durga and Shiva. Actually, it's Ramadevi and Narayan is the first interactions, Vishnu, and then it'll go over to Shiva and Shakti and different living entities. So in this universe, you'll have these male and female. So if you multiply 12 by the 360, so you multiply 1 and 2 by 3 and 6, then you'll always get the 432 number. So this is always there. 432, 432,000, 432 million, 4 billion, 320 million. You just put zeros on the end. And this is how the Bhagavatam does all of the different calculations. And the other way of doing that is 800, and you get Kali Yuga, 432,000 years. So the other way is Dwapara Yuga, 864,000. So that 864 is just doubling 432. So the 432 is made by the 12, which is masculine, and then the 360, which is space. So you've got time and space. So you have the 12, and then you have the 360, make the 432 number. And then you have the 24. So that's the day and the night. Instead of just the 12 hours, you have the 24 hours. And then you'll get the 864 number. So in Bhagavatam, that's all the maths that's there. And they use combinations of those everywhere throughout the whole Bhagavatam. And in the past, people understood that. It was very simple. But now it's all hidden by some clever architecture and planning, and some clever, how would you say? It started off as clever, a concept, and then people took the ball and ran with it and found out the next thing within that illusion. Like I said about the atomic physicists, if they want to go into the atom, they'll just find a world within a world within a world, and they'll be led on their way. And same with our scientists studying the universe. They just think it goes on and on and on and on. But Vyasadeva doesn't say that. He says it's 4 billion miles in diameter. He gives the exact measurements for every single place in the universe. So there is something in contention in relation to that. Prabhupada writes in one place, quoting his spiritual master. Now, one Prabhu over there was mentioning to me, well, what about this figure of what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati put forward? So Prabhupada mentions in a purport that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was an amazing astrologer. And we know he's a genius, he's a pure devotee, he's a mathematician, he's an astrologer. Everything's perfect about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. No problem. And Prabhupada. But in relation to one thing from the Surya Siddhanta, it mentions that the circumference of the universe, if you do the calculations which he did, would be 18 quadrillion yojanas, and you multiply that by 8 to get the miles. However, Srimad Bhagavatam mentions it's 4 billion, which is a tiny figure compared to 18 quadrillion. There's so many zeros after that. So 4 billion, and then you multiply that by pi, 3.142. So 4 multiplied by 3, you've got 12. So you ain't got much more than 12 and a half, 13 billion max. And that's the billion for the circumference. That's given by Vyasadeva. So His Holiness Sadaputa Prabhu, he was following this teaching, and he propounded that it's 18 quadrillion, and Prabhupada had written it, and Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj had quoted it, and they're all perfect, and Sadaputa was also just so unbelievable. So you wonder, well, it must be like that, because these guys are so great. However, if you study the text, same with this one of Prabhupada, you find there's one small thing where there's a slip-up in their understanding. And that small thing is this. It's easy when you know it, but... So the sloka from Surya Siddhanta says, you can calculate the circumference of the universe via the revolutions of the moon in the day of Brahma, in Brahma's kalpa. So then you say, well, we're on Earth, and the moon's revolving once every 2 weeks, and so you've got 52 weeks in the year, so shall we say 26 times per year, and then you say, how many years is there in the kalpa of Brahma? 4,320,000,000. And then you make a calculation, right? And you times that by pi, etc., etc. So you come up with this ginormous figure. However, Lord Krishna says to Brahma, when Brahma tried to steal the cowherd boys and calves, he said, first he summoned all the other Brahmas, and then Brahma said, you know, what's happening with all these other Brahmas? And he said, well, you've only got 4 heads, whereas some of these have hundreds, and some have thousands, and some have hundreds of thousands. So the idea with the heads is that you need more heads the bigger your universe is. But yours is tiny, yours is small. So your universe only measures 4 billion miles. That's Lord Krishna's words. So they must account for something, and that's Bhagavatam. So if Surya Siddhanta says something else, and Bhagavatam says something else, they say, well, that's Bhagavat cosmology, and this is Puranic cosmology, some other thing. But it's not correct. The point is that Brahma also has a day. Brahma has a day and a night. And during that day, the entire universe is created, and at night it's destroyed. So the moon and the sun for Brahma only move once. They just go one revolution. So you can calculate the circumference of the universe via knowing the revolutions of the moon in the day of Brahma. It's one revolution. Once. And therefore, Vyasadev's teaching is perfect. We don't need to touch it. It's 4 billion, and it doesn't need to change. So there's some small misunderstanding because they're taking our Earth as being in the formula each time. So there's another concept which I mentioned about, and that is chapter 19. The Earth that we live on is called the island of Jambudweep. Whereas we have another island mentioned in chapter 16, 17, and 18, which is chapter 17 is the descent of the Ganges, but it's still talking about Jambudweep Island. It's the 9 prayers of the residents and the 7 in those 3 cantos. So in that 3 cantos, it's talking about Jambudweep as an island. And then it mentions another Jambudweep, our Earth. So you say, wow, what's going on here? There's some contention. So in the Bhagavatam, there's so many small things like that. And that's why I mentioned how you study via Shabda Brahman and you try and find the heart of the author. And you try and go in such minute details. And how do you do that? You do it by listening over and over and over and over and over and over again. Never by 1 reading, 2 readings, 3 readings, no. I've had the good fortune to be able to do some kind of work where I hear Bhagavatam. So I've been able to hear Srimad Bhagavatam for like 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day for the last 20 years. And so that's just a stroke of good fortune. But by doing that, you can enter into the smallest of things. You can listen to for the little tiny things that you would miss otherwise. if you don't go over and over and over. So, in relation to time, Maitreya mentions that the beings on Mahaloka live for 4,320,000,000 years. So the universe is destroyed in 4,320,000,000 years. So they live for just within the expanse of our whole universe, whereas the demigods, there's 14 of them within the day of the universe. So there's 14 of those demigods and Manus come and go, but only one being on Mahaloka. So it's mentioned that Bhrigu Muni, he's one of the ancestors from Mahaloka, and he goes to Janaloka when he sees the universe being burnt up. They move sages like Bhrigu. So these are the sons of Brahma, Bhrigu and Narada, etc. They also lose their bodies after every day of Brahma, and they come back again in the self-same body. So does Brahma. He forgets everything, and the Lord has to come back and help him to understand how to create. The Lord has to remind him of who he is and how is it he has to create the universe again. And then he clicks and then he does it. Similarly, the Lord comes to us. When we go into delta state in the deep hours of the morning, say 2 o'clock, maybe 1 o'clock for devotees because they wake early, then we forget who we are. We lost whole relationship with our body, and we go into the blackness of nothingness. When we come back from that, the Lord sends messages to our heart, and they come as pictures or dreams. It's called hypnagogic imagery. So you have pictures and dreams, and you learn who you are again. The Lord tells you what is your life, who are you in life, and this and that. You wake up and think it's all normal, because by the time all these atomic particles have combined, for instance, there's one atomic measurement of 16 atoms combining, and it just went out of my head there. It's some figure like 16,000 divisions, and that's just a few atomic particles combining. And so you have so many divisions of time, so many thousands and thousands, just within 16 atomic particles. Imagine when you get to a second, and there's hundreds of millions of divisions, and your mind has actually got to go inside all of those to get to the 0 point of total blackness. So when you come back, you've forgot everything. And then you think it just happened now in this time frame of seconds and minutes and etc. as you wake up. But actually, the Lord is giving you information prior to that. And Lord Brahma, his time frame is a lot different to ours. So 1 second for Lord Brahma on Satyaloka is 100,000 Earth years. You mentioned before 1 day of the demigods is 100,000. But in Brahma's case, it's 1 second, 1 split second. You may say, well, he stole the cowherd boys and calves for a second and only 1 year went by on this earth. So that's something else, that's another thing, which I can explain if you want, but that's not to do with this. So these are the ideas of time, how they're moving, and on Mahaloka they live for the entire expanse of the universe. So those beings are called saints, and they don't have physical bodies like us. They can manifest one if they want, but they don't. And that's why Vidura asked this question. He wants to know, what about those beings that don't have a physical body? What about the beings, because Prabhupada explained that on the moon planet, which is the highest one, they're almost invisible to our eyes. They almost don't have physical bodies. But it isn't until Mahaloka, where in the Sakash, Maha, then Jana, and Tapa, and Satya. So it isn't until that place where they have non-physical bodies. So after Maha comes Jana, then Tapa, then Satya. And the next time frame to be given in the Bhagavatam is Satya. So in Satya, it's mentioned that the beings live for 15 billion, what's the figure? if you multiply, anyone got a calculator there? Anyone got a telephone with a calculator? Okay, I'll do it. Calculator. 4 3 0 0 0 0 0 times by 360. Now, 154 trillion 800 million. So the beings on Satyaloka, they live for 15, it's not 154. It's 15 trillion 480 billion. Okay, so you've got the demigods who live for 71 sets of Divya Yugas, so an entire 4 yugas combined is 4,320,000, the 432 number, 4,320,000 years. You multiply that by 71 or 72, either, because they die after 72. And then you get their lifespan, which is 306 billion years. So after that, you have Mahaloka, which is 4,300,000,000 years. And after that, you have Satyaloka given. These are the things given. And you have Satyaloka given as 15 billion, was it 480 million? So that 15 trillion. So 15 trillion is nowhere near 311 trillion, right? That's Brahma. But these are in Satyaloka. So you can see this place is not the same as Brahmaloka. So we hear these 4 higher planets. So if you do calculations and everything is, as I said, 12 by 360. So if you take this 430 number of the resonance of Mahaloka and you multiply that by 360, which I just did, you get the lifespan of the residents on Satyaloka. And you have to add a 0 for a certain reason. But it's just this revolution of the sun. But you can't get Lord Brahma's lifespan by doing that. To get Lord Brahma's lifespan, you have to come back to our Earth. Our Earth is so special, it's the center of the whole universe, everything. There is nothing as special as our Earth. Because what is the center? The center is the place called the heart. This is the seat of religion. So this is where the Supersoul lives. This is where Lord Krishna comes to enact his pastimes. Everything takes place in the heart. Everything takes place in the center. And our Earth is right in the center of the universe. And right in the center of that Earth is a place called Naimisharanya. And in Naimisharanya, Lord Brahma put a pin, and on that pin, it's called the hub. He then put a piece of string, and that string goes out to Pushkara Dweep. And on Pushkara Dweep, he put another pin, and then he made a circle going around. You know how you do, you make a circle by drawing a pin, and you make this string go around. So he made the lifespan for the residents of the demigods on Pushkara Dweep in relation to our lifespan here on Earth. Yes, Prabhu. Do you want to give him the... Thank you for speaking, because I need a break.
There is a concept very difficult to understand for me. Is how comes that the sun, which is a very regular planet, runs around the universe, is giving so many different
Louder?
times,
Louder?
lots of times, so many different lots of times,
Yeah.
according to the place where we are.
Yeah.
This is completely ununderstandable.
Yeah. It's a wonderful question. He's asking about the sun, how is it going around so many laps of times to make the different time frames? This is one of the main topics that I'm going to explain, how the universe is structured according to the movements of the sun, how time is created. You know, time is created via destruction. So you measure time in terms of entropy, the destruction of your body. So Prabhupada mentions every time the sun rises and the sun sets, it removes 24 hours from your body. So the sun is the Lord's representative, the Lord himself, who both gives life and takes life. He gives life in the form of knowledge, so he gives you opportunities to live life and gain knowledge, and you get prana through your third eye, so your body can move properly. And then he also takes your life away. So if you try and understand the universe according to modern science and the way they say the sun is moving around the universe, you have absolutely no chance. They don't even try, because according to the Bhagavatam, there are specifics of how everyone has a certain lifespan. Whereas in modern science, they don't even say anyone exists. And then they say there's our solar system, and then they mention a sun called ISKCON or something, and it's like 500,000 times the size of our sun, some ginormous sun planet. And it's like, it would take up 2 billion miles, so half of the entire universe would be filled with the one sun, according to scientists. And they say there are thousands of these suns in the galaxies, you know. Bhagavatam doesn't say that, not at all. So if you try and understand time from the angle of scientists, you'll have no chance whatsoever. However, Bhagavatam explains it very nicely, and it's very easy to understand. And I'll explain everything in relation to that. So at the end of this, you'll be very clear on it. But firstly, you have to discard the idea that the sun is stagnant and the earth is spinning around on its own axis at 1,000 miles an hour to make the day and night. So the sun just stays there and the earth spins around. So if you're situated here and then it's noon or something, and then when the earth spins, then maybe it's the morning, then it's the afternoon, and then it's the evening because the sun's here and the earth's spun, and then it's coming back to the morning, and then the afternoon, then the evening. So you have to discard that idea completely, because it doesn't work in Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam says the sun's moving around 760,800,000 miles on its circuit, so to speak. So the sun. So let's finish with one tiny thing and then go on to that. What time is it now? How long have I been speaking for? Okay, so it's 12:30 now. As I said to you, I haven't done any planning for this, so forgive me if I'm missing things out, or if I'm going at a certain pace, or if I'm not. There is so much to know, and I haven't even discussed the structure of the universe yet, but there is a lot to know. So firstly, this one thing on the Satyaloka. So you can get Satyaloka by multiplying it by 360, and I'll answer your question as well, Prabhu. So you can see that Mahaloka and Satyaloka, they're in relationship with each other in a circle. There is some circle of a sun or something in a sphere that's giving them both a time frame. And our Earth is in relation to the entire Brahmanda, the entire universe, or the entire day of Brahma, or the entire Kalpa, the 12 hours of Brahma. You can't get that from Mahaloka. You can only get Brahma's lifespan by the 432 number. So Mahaloka is 430. So if you were to try and multiply that and get 311 trillion 40 billion, it won't work. The maths doesn't fit. But if you multiply the figure 4320, which is it's the Kali Yuga, it's the Divi Yuga, it's the lifespan of the universe, then you multiply that by 12 hours of Brahma, then you multiply it by his 100 years of his life, then you'll get his lifespan. So he pinned the wheel of time. Prabhupada says it's on the Vyava Tantra. He mentions it in Bhagavatam, first canto, I think. Brahma created a wheel of time, and he pinned the center at Namisharanya, and then the outside is at Pushkara Dweep for the demigods. So you see that the time in the Bhagavatam is measured very nicely, and Vyasadeva gives all the different timings there for people to understand it. So how is this made? Definitely it's been made by the sun rising and setting, and then you have the moon, which will take care of the nights, and the moon is known as he who divides time. So I mentioned to you, if you want to go into the atom, like scientists want to split the atomic particles, it's only the mind that does it, because the mind is what you can split the atom with. The moon is known as he who divides time. So then you have what's called the Shishumara planetary system. So that is all the different planets in the sky that rotate around what's called the zodiac, the wheel of time. And they go at different orbits so that you can keep universal time. So that all the different beings, it's like one ginormous clock that's up in the universe. So you have the minutes, the hands, the seconds, the hours, the days, the months, the years, the centuries, the, what's it called, the millenniums. You have Brahmas, Kalpas, and you have in between the Manvantars. That was the word I was looking for. You have the Manvantars. So they're all accounted for in the Shishumara planetary system. And it's described very nicely in chapter 24, I believe, of 5th canto. So all of this is dependent on the sun. So if you look into quantum physics, so I'm not a scientist, but Einstein mentioned in his theory of relativity, he mentioned that light is formed from the photons interacting within the atomic, how would you say, interactions. The photons and the electrons, etc., they're combining and they're creating energy. And so that forms light, so to speak. So that only interacts within an atmosphere. So that word is very important to understand. Now Aristotle, who is a Greek philosopher, he says that light manifests according to the perturbation or the movement of the air. So he says it's something slightly different to Einstein. Einstein says it's on the atomic level, and he says it's on this level according to the different movements and perturbations. So that can be excitement. So for example, if you pass an electric current through something and you make it excited, then it might shake, and that might form light, so to speak, according to Aristotle. And my research says that they're both correct, and you have to understand how they are. So if Einstein is correct in quantum physics, and they've done a lot of research to get that, then how is it possible for us to see the sun in outer space? Because outer space is dark, it has no atmosphere, but light only manifests within an atmosphere, so they say. So if light manifests within an atmosphere, and the sun is in outer space, which is complete blackness, and it has no atmosphere, then how can we see it? So, Lord Krishna mentions in the Bhagavatam that the sun is giving off its radiation and illuminating the entire world, heating and lighting the entire world. So we know it's the sun that does it, but it's certainly not the sun in outer space that we're seeing, because you can't see the sun in outer space. What happens is the light particles, if you like, or the energy particles, they come to Earth, and then within Earth, once they hit an atmosphere, then they can come as light. But there has to be an atmosphere. So what we see as the... Do you mind if I just take this off? Sorry. It's itchy. What we see as the sun globe is a manifestation of just one frequency of light. And that frequency is called the infrared spectrum. So one day, I was waking early in the morning, 1 o'clock, and looking at the stars, looking at the sky outside. I write this in my book as a testimonial, so to speak. And it was a little bit light, and as I watched the dawn coming, it was getting more light in different parts of the sky combined, whereas the sun was supposed to be coming from one place, it was just as light over another place. And then as I watched the sun globe rise, I seen, so the whole place was illuminated. Because I live in the northern hemisphere, the sunrise lasts for many hours. So the whole sky was illuminated to what we call nautical twilight, which is just before the sun rises, but it's still plenty enough light to see. And there was no shadow. I could see everything perfect, like I could see you now. But there was no shadows on anywhere. There was no shadows on the bushes or anything. It was just light was everywhere. Light was coming from every direction. If you look, you'll see the same thing yourself. Then the sun was rising. And as the sun was rising, I could see it forming shadows. Whenever it hit something like a tree, the sun's coming up, there was a shadow formed. But over here it was just as light, and there was no shadows anywhere. So that informed me that this light is different from this light. They're two different lights. So we have the sun itself is hot, and you can feel it. As it's rising, you can feel some heat. But you can't feel any heat in a different place, or you can't feel the heat off the moon, etc. Because they're not hot. They're not according to the infrared spectrum of light. So the sun globe that we see, it's just an apparent manifestation according to one tiny frequency of light. It's not the whole thing. It's a tiny little bit. There are, the gamma rays and the X-rays and the different radio waves and ultraviolet light, etc. So you have the 5 different levels of the atmosphere, and you have the light manifesting in these ultraviolet rays in the top of the atmosphere, so that lights up everything. And it's not until the sun globe comes that you see a different form of light, but light's still there, you see. So light is coming to the earth, but the sun is heating up the earth. Yeah? So that means that the light we see is local. The sun we see is local. It's not the one in outer space. So, I mentioned 2 points of contention which I don't take pleasure mentioning to fix things when they're not right. But this is a huge point of contention, this one. And that is that there are many, many suns that are manifesting on different islands to give the time frames. So, excuse me. If we go by Bhagavatam, and it mentions that human beings live for 100 years, and we know that the light of the sun manifests every day, 360 days a year, 365 now. So that then takes away 1 year from our life, then we have 100 of those chances. However, on Jambudweep, on the other islands, people live for 10,000 years. So where's the sun? What's the sun doing here to make people live for 100 years? And just over the road in Jambudweep, which isn't very far, our Earth is only 8,000 miles. It's not very big. So you have Bharatvarsha, where people live for 10,000 years, supposedly. Bhagavatam says the other 8 islands of Jambudvip, not ours, the other 8. So that means the other part of the rest of the place. So what is their sun? So Sadaputa got around this by inventing something called a hidden dimension. They're in a dimension that we don't see, and they have all different rules. But Bhagavatam doesn't say that. Bhagavatam says the 8 earthly Varshas, they live for 10,000 years. It doesn't say they're in no heavenly. It says they fall down from their heavenly positions to enjoy in the pleasure gardens of the other 8 Varshas. These are quotes from Bhagavatam. I'm not interested in Sanskrit, I apologize, but these are, what's written in Bhagavatam. So, similarly, Einstein, when he couldn't get his equations to fit, and Sadaputa, by the way, although he's the most intelligent person we had, he couldn't get his globe model to fit Srimad Bhagavatam, because it doesn't fit. It's not possible to fit. So, when you have this concept, what I'm mentioning, it fits. It fits very nicely, because it's very simple. So Einstein, he had to invent a thing called dark matter because his equations didn't fit in his theory of relativity. His constant for the speed of light, there's problems in it. So he invented dark matter, and he said this makes up 95% of the universe, or some huge figure. So most of the universe is just darkness, just empty matter. Anyway, similarly, Sadaputa mentioned that the other 8 earthly Varshas of Jambudvip are in higher dimensional reality, but that's not mentioned in Bhagavatam. However, if we allow them to have their own sun and moon and star system, which manifests in their own atmosphere, just like science says, it manifests within an atmosphere, then they can have their own sun going around its own circuit. They can live for all the time they want, It doesn't affect us because we're a self-contained island. That's why we're called the island of Jambudvip, and Jambudvip is the bigger. Jambudvip is 800,000 yojanas, 800,000 miles, 100,000 yojanas, and we're 8. So we're tiny, and that's very big. So there are a lot of points of contention that can be ironed out, and that I have ironed out. And any person who wants my work, just take it freely, and you can research it, and you can pull it apart, you can do anything you want. I'll be most happy with that. So when we have a sun manifesting locally, we can have 100 years for the lifespan in Kali Yuga. Now let me mention one thing before I won't go. Should I go on to speak about the structure of Bhumandala in this, or should I do that tomorrow? It may be a little overpowering, I don't know. But anyway, let's speak about Kali Yuga. It's mentioned in the 12th canto that the beings in Kali Yuga will start shrinking in size. And they will live till they're like 50 years old and be 3 feet tall, for example. So now, in the beginning of this yuga, we're 6 feet tall and we live for 100 years. Lord Krishna left 5,000 years ago. Now, our calendars show us that the time the sun takes to make a yearly revolution is 365 days. But if you do any calculations in Bhagavatam, it makes no sense with 365 days. But there is 365 days. So what happened is, when all these Bhagavatam are spoken and written, and in the rest of the universe, etc., there are 360 days. There's always a circle, 360 degrees. Now, Lord Krishna left 5,000 years ago. For every 1,000 years, we gain an extra day. So what is happening is the sun on our island of Jambudvip is shrinking. It's losing power. And the more it loses power, the more Earth shrinks in size. And as it shrinks in size, it's a circle, it's an island. And around the outside, the sun doesn't reach to the perimeters. So when the sun doesn't reach the perimeters, there's ice forming. And there's big ice walls forming. And science explains that 4,500 years ago, the ice wall started forming in Antarctic. Also at that time, Lord Krishna left, and there was a ginormous flood recounted in the Bible. And Noah built this huge ark, and he took everybody on board this ark because he knew there was going to be a deluge on earth, and there was a deluge on earth. And at that time, our sun, previously there was just water. There was an ocean that connected all the parts of Jambudweep. Now we're a self-contained island because we have ice on the perimeter. And that ice is growing and growing and growing, and Earth itself will shrink in size. So if you do calculation, and you say 432,000 years of Kali Yuga, then we would gain 432 years extra. If there's 1 year for every 1,000 years. So far we've gained 5,000 years because Lord Krishna left 5 years ago. So that would mean, if it was 360,000, that would mean an extra year. So that extra year would mean people would live for 50 years. In other words, the sun will be spinning twice as fast and the circuit will be smaller and smaller. So they'll actually be living 100 years within 50 years because there'll be 720 days in a year. But if it's 432,000, then they'll live even less than 50 years. They might live 40 years or something. And they won't be 3 feet tall. They'll be 2 feet 8 inches or something, you know? They'll be even smaller. So this is how accurate Bhagavatam is. And it tells all the time frames in every place, in all of the universes. So the next time frame out from why our earth is special, I've told you, because it's the heart, it's the center of everything. So our earth also keeps time in the whole of the universe, not the rest of Jambudweep. Those are places of enjoyment. Our earth is a place of fruitive activities. All earths in the universe, there are many earths. We're not the only earth. There are many. Jambu, Plaksha, Shalmali, Kusha, Kruncha, and Shaka. So all of these earths have a sun, a moon, a star system, a zodiac, etc., etc. They have all their own manifestations, and they all go around a certain circuit. So our earth is the representative for Jambudweep. The rest of them, they're having like a little holiday before they come here. This is called a place of fruitive activities. And the next, Plakshadweep, that's a place of fruitive activities. And the next, Shalmalidweep, that's a place of fruitive activities. So that means from that platform, you can gain pious karma or opposite. What's the opposite? Impious. Yeah, so you can go up or you can go down. It's up to you. But earth is a place of fruitive activities. And time and time again, people think it's only this earth. It's not this earth. It's all earths. So after Sukadev mentions about the island of Jambudweep in chapter 19, chapter 20 starts discussing the structure of the universe. The first place he mentions is Plakshadweep. And he mentions that Plakshadweep surrounds Jambudweep, the fort like Jambudweep. So, yes, Haribol. So there's an analogy given as a fort for Jambudweep. Whereas for Plakshadweep, it mentions the heavenly setting of paradisical gardens. So beautiful gardens and flowers and everything. And it mentions that the residents of Plakshadweep are beautiful like the demigods. They're surrounded by the sugarcane ocean instead of the saltwater ocean. And they live for 1,000 years. So 2 lifespans are given as a clue. So, do you remember I mentioned about the 4 forms of Shabda Brahman? This is why you need them to understand Bhagavatam. This teacher, Vyasadeva, he doesn't go into specifics. He'll give you something and say, do the rest yourself. I'll give you an example, like the teacher gives an example, 5 plus 3, you do it like this. And then he says, now it's up to you. Find the rest yourself. And by you looking for things in Bhagavatam, you make spiritual progress. You don't make spiritual progress by being told, Vaikarika. You take that and then you run with it inside. And you have to then use the next form, Pasyanti. You have to, Madhyama. You have to use these forms looking inside for the answers. So then in a way further on, he gives a final measurement, but he doesn't give it as a lifespan. He gives it in code form. He says, Lord Brahma sits atop a lotus flower with 100 million golden lotus petals. So everyone, what's this? You know, what does it mean? He's actually talking about the lifespan of the residents in the whole universe, in the whole of Bhumandala. But he doesn't want to make it simple. He wants everybody to search for the Lord. The Lord is known as one who's, he reveals himself according to his own wishes. When he sees you are sincerely searching for him. He won't do it just by asking you to see him. So you have to search for him. And I've done a lot of searching, trying and begging and screaming and drawings, billions of drawings, and ripping them up and throwing them away and starting again, etc. And you'll have to do the same on whatever topic you want to understand within there. Yes, Prabhu?
Yes, to introduce some controversy
Yeah.
about the speculative knowledge, just like you presented.
Mm-hmm.
But some gurus in ISKCON, they say you cannot understand just by reading the books of Srila Prabhupada.
Yes.
You have to be explained by some real life story.
Yes.
So how can we reconcile
Yes.
those 2 aspects, speculative knowledge and
Yeah.
revealed knowledge?
Yeah. Shabda can't be speculative because you must check it by a Shastra. Yeah? So when you write something, you write it as a thesis, for example, what you think it might be. And then it has to be checked. And then people will check it. In our movement, it has to be checked by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So the Bhagavatam is the Bible. If your thesis clashes with certain verses, then it shouldn't be accepted. But if it's matching, so Sadapuda at the end of his book on explaining the universe, he was very beautiful man, by the way. He said, if I present thesis A, it matches with this verse and this verse and this verse, but it clashes with this verse and this verse. However, if I change it, alter it, and make it match with these, then it clashes with this one and this one and this one. So he said, my final conclusion is that further research needs to be done. That's a real gentleman to say that. And I really appreciated when I read that. I really appreciated that sincerity and that level of understanding. So when a person will explain something to you, they're trying to help you. They're giving you knowledge. But that knowledge is not vigyan. It's not realized knowledge. It can only come in the form of external sound vibration, Vaikarika. From there, you have to take it inside. And you have to understand what are the 4 forms of Shabda Brahman, the 3 internal forms. So, should I speak of those now or tomorrow? Now. So it's mentioned, the first one is Vaikarika. and that's external. So a teacher might give some knowledge to his students, and they then have to take that knowledge. So you're reading Bhagavatam, Maitreya Rishi is speaking, that's knowledge for you, and then you try to think, what does he mean by this sloka? Bhagavatam are written in chord form, in slok forms, and then Prabhupada gives an explanation to help you understand better. And Prabhupadas are often from the angle of bhakti. Fifth canto, there's some technicals in there, and maybe there's no need to understand technicals, so he still gives bhakti in the fifth canto. So that's what we really need, you know, that's the real thing. So after that, there's one called Madhyama. Madhyama and then Pasyanti. And then the fourth one is called Para. Para. P-A-R-A. So that means you have to take the information you've been given and take it internally and meditate on it. You have to use your intellect. You have the left and right hemispheres, the intellect and the mind, they're controlled by these. So you have to use them. And by doing that, you go through the nadis, the internal nadis, your left and your right, the Indra nadi, and there's your Shumna nadi going up your back, Brahma nadi. So you have to firstly think about what's been said. Then you have to see it with internal vision. You have to have a third eye, like Sanjaya seen Bhagavad Gita, sorry. So you have to, this entire Bhagavatam has to be a way of life for you. Like I mentioned, when I used to hear on the MP3, well, I still do, but you have to enter into that. You have to see that as you would see a movie on a screen. That has to be so real for you, that Bhagavatam, that life, that teaching, that you have to see the external world as being illusion. It's a trip. This Shabda Brahman, this performing your Manasi Seva with the mind, you're spiritualizing the mind in order to focus on spiritual topics in the heart. It's a trip. It's a journey. Consciousness itself is not stagnant, ever. It's always in flux. There's always movement there. So every moment of our life is a journey, and studying Bhagavatam is that way. So the next level is para, in which you have to have the entire feelings of what's conveyed. So you have to feel what is being said. Like I mentioned with Satyananda and Swami's class. He was trying to describe things in such a way that you could see them. Maybe narrating from Gopal Champu or books like this, which are more visual than Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam gives the essence of things. Gopal Champu will give some more details about something, you know, so then you can see it better. So in Bhagavatam, you find that every character, every person introduced, everyone who speaks, they have their own persona. They have their own energy vibration. And you have to zoom in on that. And you have to take that person as your guru. Even Hiranyakashipu, he spoke some wonderful words in Bhagavatam. Vyasadeva wouldn't have included Hiranyakashipu's teachings if they weren't there, if they weren't good, you know. So they all have this persona, and you have to see that person. You have to connect with that person. So we may think that Bhagavatam was spoken 5,000 years ago as an example, after Lord Krishna passed and the sages of Naimisharanya gathered in the center of the universe, of course, Naimisharanya, and they gathered to hear this great 1,000-year sacrifice of reciting Srimad Bhagavatam and discussing it. So you might think that was a long time ago, and you might think when Lord Krishna was here and Bali Maharaj's pastimes were so long ago, and Prahlad Maharaj's pastimes were so long ago, but the way I'll explain to you how time passes in the universe, for some of these beings it was only yesterday. Just one day. And therefore Sukadev can come and speak all these things as if it's just fresh in his mind, because it might have happened 5 minutes before. And he might be in a different place, and time appears different in that place. So he was here, and then he went over, for an example, someone was here. They went over to Pushkara Dweep. 100,000 years is 1 year here. The other way around. 1 day is 100,000 years here. Right? So he might have went over to Pushkara Dweep for a day, and then 100,000 years had come back. Only a day's passed for him. Not much time. So those people, they're still here. You have to connect with their energy in Srimad Bhagavatam, and you have to take instructions from them directly. Bhagavatam's speaking directly to you, all the sages here. There's no third party in Bhagavatam. When you write a book, there are different ways you can write a book. You can write from the first voice, the second voice, the third voice. And, when you include yourself as part of stuff, you'll be writing in the first voice. And then there's the third voice is the most common. This is when people are writing, say, a novel or an academic paper, and they refer to themselves in different terms, and there's different aspects involved in novels where you're in the novel and you're narrating from a certain angle. However, there is virtually no mention of some book being written in the fourth voice. This is just unheard of. But Srimad Bhagavatam is written in the fourth voice. There is nothing in the world written in the fourth voice, but Bhagavatam is. How is it written in the fourth voice? When every single person is saying exactly the same thing. Their perspective is non-different from the other person's perspective. So in here, we hear Maitreya Rishi speaking Srimad. Well, first let's hear Lord Brahma. So Lord Vishnu comes, speaks Bhagavatam to Brahma. Brahma passes on to Narad Muni. Narad Muni passes it on to Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva passes it on to Sukadev. Sukadev passes it on to the Sutta Goswami. Sutta Goswami passes it on to the sages Naimisharanya. And then we're hearing. Yeah? That's one. Then we have Maitreya. So Maitreya heard from his Parashara Muni. Parashara Muni heard it from Ananda Shesh at the bottom of the universe. So we're hearing from Narad, his perspective. We're hearing from Vyasadev's perspective, Sukadev's perspective. We're hearing from Lord Brahma's perspective. We're hearing from all the different perspectives. And every single one is speaking about the same thing. Krishna's to Bhagavan Swayam. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is the Amala Purana, and all the different ways to advance in spiritual life, they're all there in Srimad Bhagavatam by all these sages. So they're all speaking in the same way. So when you have these understandings of what's going on, you have amazing teachers in there. You never have to think that there's no one there for you teaching you. You have to have, yes, it's good to have an external teacher if that person knows something, and it's so wonderful to sit in Bhagavatam class and everyone's got something good to give to us. We've all got something. And as long as we keep Krishna in the center, and Krishna is the ideal of our glorification, and the Acharya, Prabhupada, and all the Acharyas, and it's not just Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda, and then you go to the Adi Guru. If you go over to Rupa Goswami, he's not saying any different. Prabhupada's not saying any different from what Rupa Goswami ever did. And neither is anyone in Bhagavatam. So they're all speaking from the fourth voice. And we have to make our presentation from that fourth voice, from that Shastric voice, So then you have to check your presentations. When you try and make it from science, and these people are speculating, and you're trying your hardest. Yes, there is conferences now in Bombay where all the great scientists have just met a few days ago, and it's amazing. And let them do whatever they do, but if you've taken your knowledge from the ascending process, from the ascending process, so they're speculating. We have to take the descending process of master to disciple. So that's in Bhagavatam from all these different people. And then when we speak it, we must speak the same. But we must have assimilated that information. When Sukadev speaks, he mentions in the beginning, as I've heard and as I have assimilated, so then I can speak, you know. Like my wife said, don't you want to do some study for this? I said, well, I'm supposed to have lived the life, you know. If I haven't lived the life, if I haven't assimilated, what's the point in me speaking? So when you talk, you have to put Krishna there first and in the center, and then your glorifications are for Lord Krishna and the Bhagavatam and Prabhupada and all the acharyas and everything. So you can research Bhagavatam, and I wouldn't really call it speculation, as long as you can study it and via Shastra you can prove your perspective. And as long as that perspective isn't contradicting anything the other sages are given from this fourth voice. You know? So this is a wonderful way. I'm just telling you Vaikarika, which is only information. But what you have to do is experience these stories. If there's some 10th canto that's speaking about Lord Krishna lifting Govardhan Hill, let's just speak that. And it says that with his left hand he held up Govardhan Hill. And what you have to do is not just hear that pastime, but experience it. You have to see it internally, you have to think about it, and then you have to experience it with your whole heart. And then you're hearing Bhagavatam. There's always mention about one who hears this. So that's different from listening. There's listening and hearing. So if you listen, that's the external Vaikarika. But if you hear, that's a different process altogether. Then you perform Manasi Seva by studying Bhagavatam. So I'll apologize for if I've said anything wrong. I don't mean to in any way, and sorry for just waffling. Maybe tomorrow we can speak more on the structure of the universe and go more in depth about the sun. Is it okay? Has anybody got a question? Okay, give Mother the... I apologize for speaking too long. Can you speak louder? I'm quite deaf.
Lifespan of living entity is decreasing. Earth is covered with ice.
Around Earth, yeah.
Yeah, around the Earth there is ice.
Yeah.
So how does it affect the lifespan of living beings?
Okay. So she's mentioning that as said, around Earth is ice, an ice wall. How does that affect the lifespan of the living entities? At present, NASA is controlling the way we see Earth, and NASA says that the South Pole is down by Argentina. However, the South Pole is everywhere around the whole island of Earth. And I don't know how many, but virtually every country has laid claim to a part of Antarctica. And they have this Antarctic Treaty, which says that no boat anywhere can, or no aeroplane, nothing can come within a certain radius of Antarctica. You can't go near it. Otherwise, your plane will be shut down, your boat will be shut down, etc. So what they're doing is they're hiding the truth. And no one's allowed to go near it. And why would all these countries on Earth have any rights to Antarctica if it's down towards South America there, Argentina? Why has New Zealand got a claim to it? Why has England got a claim? Why has Russia got a claim to it, you know? They're miles away. They have a claim because it's right around. And not only is it around us, but it's also in the center. So when the sun goes over Earth, it goes over 3 circles. It has the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. And then it has the middle section, the equator. So when it moves inwards, then it's summer for those in the northern region. And the sun doesn't quite reach the center, the rays of the sun. And so because it's cold there, the ice forms. And in the northern hemisphere, because the sun is going around the center, the north, when it's exactly in the center, they don't see nighttime in the summer. Because it's if you take a circle and you're in the center of that circle, it's equal proportions everywhere you go. So it's always daytime. And when it comes to the South Pole, then it's nighttime in the north for 24 hours. Because the sun is going around and it doesn't reach the inside. And it also isn't strong enough to reach the far outside. Therefore, the ice walls are building up on the outside and the ice walls are building up on the inside. So what they're doing is they're shrinking the Earth. And as they're shrinking the Earth, they're shrinking the what do you call that? Circumambulation of the sun. The sun has its path. So that's getting smaller and smaller because the Earth's getting smaller. It's getting smaller from outside and getting smaller from inside. So as the sun's path is getting smaller, then it's going faster. And then the days are passing quicker and quicker. The same happens actually in our life. Our life is the same idea. As we get older, it goes quicker and quicker, you know, because the ignorance is building up there. It's the same idea. So you have to dispel that. So at a different time, it's obvious that the sun's rays, they went to the outside, and that means people live for longer periods. And then as they live for longer periods, the trees grow much, much taller. In Bhagavatam, it's mentioned that some trees are 80,000 miles high. No, sorry, mountains are. The branches sped for 10,000. So, yeah, it's 80,000, 10,000 yojanas. Yeah. Yes. 600, 500, I think it is, yeah. Miles wide. Huge. So we have little tiny ones. And it's said that as Kali Yuga goes on, they'll become dwarf-like shami trees, it's mentioned. So they get smaller and smaller. The potency of the vegetables will get less and less. Humans will get less and less. The prana, the life force we get through the third eye, that'll get less and less. We'll become wimps. And also they're putting chemicals in the food, etc., etc. There's plans. So this is how the lifespan decreases. This is how the potency decreases, because the sun actually loses. Because the ice is getting bigger and bigger. So, yes?
You say the sun is going above, around the Earth.
Yeah, would you like me to explain it properly tomorrow? This, how it...
The Earth is only Bharatvarsha or Jambudvip or...
Everywhere has its own atmosphere and everywhere has its own localized sun. So we have our sun going around ours. Earth is called the island of Jambudvip. It can also be called Bharatvarsha, which is referring to India specifically. So around this island, the sun goes around over a flat plane around Earth. And just, you know, you have a record player. Do you remember the old record players? They used to go round in a circle, and as the needle goes round, it will go inside to the center. You know, it plays each song. So it's going round and inside. So the sun has exactly the same motion. It's spiraling inside to the north. The north is the center, and the south is the perimeter. So the sun is spiraling inside towards the north for 6 months, and then it spirals outside towards the south. And of course, a record just goes one way, but the sun's going two ways all the time. It's going around 24 hours and 6 months one way and 6 months the other way to make the seasons. I can speak about that tomorrow if you like. I hope I didn't offend anyone. I hope it's okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Vyasadeva ki jai. Gaurav Premanandi. Yes.
My name is Rajananda.
There you go.